And so I guess like I want to speak from perspective of people who maybe are new to this, don't have a lot of experience with asking questions. You talked about how, there's a lot of people that are worried about, hey, this is a stupid question, but how would you respond to that where someone's like, hey, I'm just not going to ask this question because it sounds stupid. I don't want everybody else to know that this is what I'm thinking. I don't want them to think I don't know what I'm thinking. Because also part of it could come across as I might think that I'm anticipated to know this. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, great question, Thomas. Okay, so I just got done teaching a 3-hour MBA class in leadership last night as part of our MBA program here at the college. And one of those topics is very relevant to what you just mentioned, and that is the idea of vulnerability. Too many people, when they hear that word, they think of weakness, when in fact, it's strength. It requires courage to be vulnerable, okay? Because you put something you value at risk of someone else's judgment. For instance, a stupid question, okay? At some point, you have to be healthy enough and confident enough in yourself and also self-deprecating enough to laugh at yourself. Like, oh, that was it. I should have listened better because he or she just covered that a minute ago. That's okay. Quit taking yourself so seriously. Have fun. There's nothing like experiencing something in business, and I'll speak to manufacturing only because that's my roots are in accounting and manufacturing. Accounting, I'm not going to talk about because that's heads down, do some numbers, which I still enjoy and do. But what I love, there's nothing more I love than to walk through a manufacturing plant. And I'll tell you, I will have 1,000 questions. Literally, because it just amazes me, the technology, the engineering feats, the flow, the product, the process, the value add, all those things. I just want to, I literally want to soak it up. Okay. But I'm putting my ignorance, not in a negative sense, but I don't know, right? That's why I'm asking, at risk of being judged by somebody else. That's what vulnerability is. And vulnerability is very healthy. Just to be honest about yourself and to love yourself enough to say, could have had a V8, right? It's okay.
So speaking on the lines of vulnerability, then, I suppose, what would you say to students who are unsure about going in for the first time? They obviously they have a lot of nerves and they're not sure, especially with a big interview. But you should be vulnerable, and I think it's a good chance to show humility. And so, what would you say to someone who, just is completely unsure? Like, there's obviously going to be a lot of nerves there. Like, how would you respond to that?
Again, another great question. So I talked about this last night. So when we talk about humility, we're not talking about low self-esteem, okay? Because humility is actually the absence of self altogether, okay? So at the end of the day, they're interviewing you as much as you are interviewing them. So go in there with the confidence that it's just an interaction. It's a relationship. It's a chance to get to know somebody better. There's nothing more affirming. And again, I don't think you should flip the interview. I think that can be perceived as negative, where all of a sudden you're interviewing the person who's supposed to be interviewing you, because there's a time and place to listen and there's a time and place to talk. So I'm not suggesting you flip it. But at the same time, they're going to ask you, well, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your experience at Benedictine. Tell me about what classes you really liked. Tell me about what classes you didn't like. Tell me about your skill set here. Okay. They may ask you where you're from and say, well, do you mind? Tell me a little bit about yourself. You can reverse that in the context of the conversation. And now all of a sudden it's just you and a friend chatting it up. So it kind of brings everything down. And if she or he says a word that you don't understand or has a job, say, would you please, I'm interested in that. Would you please explain that to me? How powerful is that? Or I'm curious. Could you explain that to me? That do you feel like I'm stupid when I'm asking that? When I say I'm interested or I'm curious, or that is fantastic. Tell me more. There's nothing negative about those kinds of interactions, but just being comfortable and then listen to what she says. And you can go, I am very excited about this opportunity or about what you just said. That is exactly what I'm looking for.
All right, that's great. And I guess to wrap this up for this segment here, this topic at least, what's a, I think a lot of people would like to kind of get a scenario. So could you like give us like a real life example for you where you had to really just kind of perfect the art of inquiry, where you really got a chance to fine tune it or get to apply it, and how that affected you?
You mind if I give you three scenarios? Because three of them popped into my head. Okay. So I would say my first of all, as I suggested in college, again, I was very fearful. I was not healthy enough to be vulnerable. I didn't want to be viewed as stupid. So, but I did ask the question. So I knew what I wanted to know, and I asked the question. When I got to work, my first career was as a CPA auditor in a regional firm, and that job required inquiry. So I had to ask questions of clients in order to get from them the information I needed. So it started there. You do go in, sweaty palms, it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm stupid. But the more I did that, the more comfortable I got. So one of my practical suggestions is for those of you who are still in college, start asking questions in class because the consequences aren't severe. Work through that before you go out into the marketplace. But because I can't tell you how many times I ask a question in class and all I get is crickets. And I'm like, hello, does anybody have any questions? And then yet, sure enough, when I leave the classroom, I get bombarded, right? So practice that here. So that would be the first one. The second one, the real scenario is when you do go to work, you're not going to know it all. I guarantee it. Matter of fact, your college has prepared you with a foundation, but you're going to learn 90% more on the job. Expect that. You're not coming in with a degree where you have all the answers, because you don't. Now it's going to be contextual. Now it's going to be about that business or that industry. You've got a lot to learn. Ask the questions. Find somebody who's really knowledgeable. If you want to affirm them and make them feel like a champion, ask them questions. This guy's really interested in what I have to say. Nothing more powerful. When I got into manufacturing, I'd never been in a manufacturing plant before I transitioned from being a CPA to the apparel business. And the first job they sent me on was Hartville, Missouri. I can't even tell you where it is. It's somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. It seemed like a decent town, but here I am, this greenhorn, okay? And they put me in a manufacturing plant, and they wanted me to do an internal audit of something. I can't remember what it was. I didn't know anything about anything, but I did have my CPA auditing experience with me. So I went in, met the plant manager, and I just said, would you please walk me around? I was honest with them. I said, this is my first visit to a lean manufacturing plant. I'm so excited. So I'm going to ask 100 questions. I'll apologize in advance, but I want to learn what you're doing here. This is amazing. And we just started walking and talking. And here we go. I'm learning all about manufacturing. And I ended up a year later setting up plants in Costa Rica and Mexico for Lee Jeans because I asked all the relevant questions. So there's another example. The third one I'll offer is had the opportunity to teach over in the Netherlands at the University of Maastricht as part of our executive MBA exchange. Their professors taught to our executive MBA students, and we taught to theirs. And the observable difference was incredible. University of Maastricht is known as this entrepreneurial center of the world. I mean, they hold tons and tons of innovation. And when I was with their students, they were so skilled at inquiry. They were so skilled at listening and so skilled at inquiry, man. It was intimidating almost because you knew they were going to be really good, intelligent questions. Whereas in our students, you got crickets most of the time. And so that impressed upon me the importance of starting to develop that confidence, listening first, and that it's okay to ask, because out of questions comes innovation. I was just listening to an audiobook called A More Beautiful Question. And its premise is the idea that that's where all the innovation comes from, is from the ask. You don't ask, you don't innovate. You don't innovate, you don't grow. You don't grow, you put a lid on your own career. So when we talk about business professionalism, the art of inquiry is absolutely essential.
All right. Those are some great examples. I think there's a lot of people who could learn from that. There's a lot of people who love to learn from that. I know that I myself always have to get out there, start asking some more questions because, question will get you that much farther. And it's people love to be asked questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you really get that down, that can take you leaps and strides forward. All right. So that will conclude our first part of this session. Thank you to everybody who's watching, and stay tuned. We're going to get a second part here with Dave. So go ahead and click on to the next video, and we'll see you there.